Gold-minded records, they're not your friends.
Welcome to Horror Headquarters, a weekly horror podcast. I'm your host, Klive Kraven, with my lovely co-host,
Naya Banks.
We are here to bring you the best in all things horror. News, reviews, updates, interactive polls, discussions, interviews, and more. Stay tuned and stick around as we take on the horror genre. From the rotting graves of zombies to the blood-soaked fangs of vampires. From the claws of the werewolf to the vision of the apparition. Prepare for the slaughter orders. This is Horror Headquarters. We're just dying to talk horror. Alright, that is fucking awesome. I love that Critters theme. So, welcome to episode 5 of Horror Headquarters. Tonight's episode is going to be on the Critters franchise. I am your host, Klive Kraven, with my lovely co-host.
It's the Dan's people.
That's right, and we are back with a brand new, fresh episode for you on this lovely Tuesday. We are hoping to plow through this plethora of information in a relatively timely manner, hopefully with no skips and interruptions. My recording platform has been an issue for me, but I have a new PC coming, so hopefully any of those skips that you've been hearing in the show in the last couple episodes will be fixed in the future from hopefully next episode or the one after on. So we are excited about that. Tonight we will be covering a lot in our bone-breaking news. We have, of course, our Vital Organs discussion centered around the 4 Critters movies, part 1 through 4. We have an awesome pick for Netflix Best Pick tonight. 2 classics for the Pick Your Poison, both train-related horror films. And, of course, 7 flicks for the Body Count reviews. And, as usual, our poll of the week with the results from episode 4's poll in last week. So we got a lot to cover today. We're going to try to get through it as quick as we can and get to these damn issues with this fucking computer. We're going to plow through it best as we can. Don't go nowhere. Grab yourself a snack if you must. Use your potty. Take your big shit break. You know what I'm saying? Drop that dirty deucer. Do what you got to, that dirty Medusa. You know what I mean? Drop what you got to do. And come on back in a hurry. We're going to go ahead and get into this in just a moment. This is Klive Kraven and
Naya Banks,
reporting live from Horror Headquarters. Our news department is making a killing to bring you the latest
Bone-breaking news.
Alright, we are back with your bone-breaking news this week. And of course, we saw something that kind of caught my interest. Now, I know X-Files came back, I believe it was last year, with Season 10. However, I'm kind of late to the party, and I'm just seeing that they're renewing for Season 11, which has been announced for January 3rd, 2018.
Woo!
Now, this is pretty cool. I was always a fan of the show, but admittedly, I never watched all of them, but I always thought it was a very dope show, and when I would ever see it on TV, I would try to catch it. I do like the characters, I do like the vibe and the feel of it, and the plot behind it. I do want to check this out, and I am interested in this, but I'll have to get my hands on the box set of X-Files and watch all these originally. I do have the films, but I do not have any of the seasons, so that is something that I'm going to have to look into. But yeah, X-Files is coming for a new season, so anybody out there that is a sci-fi fan, I'm sure this is going to tickle your fancy, so looking forward to that. And like I said, me personally, I am a fan of X-Files. I would love to get my hands on the box set, and I am looking forward to a new season of it coming out for sure.
Indeed. Are you afraid of the dark?
Are you?
Fucking dorks.
Fucking dork?
Gary Doberman.
Yep.
Doberman. From the It remake, right?
Yep.
And he is involved, obviously.
So, yeah, that's fucking fantastic because I am a fan of the new remake, and I think there is some good stuff from Doberman as well, in addition to the remake that he's done. So I am definitely looking forward to checking out material from him and seeing what he brings to the table to this, because this was a dope show growing up. Anybody out there that remembers Are You Afraid of the Dark back in the day, it was a TV show on Nickelodeon. Now, this show ran, I believe, in the early 90s. I think it might even have been the late 80s to the early 90s. It was a while ago. But I know it was definitely in the early 90s, and this was just a fucking awesome show. It was a little bit darker than Goosebumps, and a little bit more edgy, I think, a little bit more adultish. but still it definitely had child elements. But it was a very cool anthology style show where every episode was a different story, and I really enjoyed it. I'm super stoked on this and really looking forward to this. This to me is one of the coolest things I think that we've actually talked about in the news. This is something that I grew up on and watched religiously as a kid, so it's definitely got the nostalgia factor going for me, and I'm very amped to check this one out, so very excited for this indeed.
And of course, because I'm born in another era, I have no idea what this show is, so forgive me.
Yeah, she is completely oblivious to it and does not have the excitement that I proclaim. However, she will get very familiar when I get my hands on the box set of this, because this is another one that they do have a box set of that I do not own. I would like to get my hands on it, but I believe it's pretty pricey. I think it came out a few years ago, some seasons of it. Not even the full thing, but a couple seasons, and it was very pricey. So I'm not sure what the pricing is like on that, but I am interested to get that. It is an absolute classic, so I would love to get my hands on this one. There's no doubt about it. That brings us to the next one. Now, this one I'm also excited about. All these stories this week are fucking fantastic. So, Day of the Dead Bloodline is apparently coming to theaters, video on demand, and digital on January 5th, 2018. Now, I am not sure the details of this film itself, other than the fact it is part of the Romero franchise. However, I do not believe Romero is involved in any way in it. I am still excited to see it because it has to do with that franchise. I'm under the impression that I think this is a retelling of the original Day of the Dead film. I can't be quoted on that, but I believe that's what I read. I am interested in checking this one out. I love Day of the Dead. You know, it's one of my favorite films, period, the original. And the Romero franchise is just a classic. I can't say enough about this. I really do want to check this out. It's going to be dropping all over basically early next year. So when January rolls around, I will be giving my thoughts on this one. We will be doing a Romero franchise show as well on all the Dead films in the future. I'm not sure when, but that will be happening. So yeah, Day of the Dead Bloodline is dropping January 5th, 2018. Look for that.
Boom. All right, I Spit on Your Grave, Deja Vu, which is obviously a sequel to I Spit on Your Grave. So that's coming soon. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to that as well. You're a big fan of the I Spit on Your Grave films. Yeah. And, you know, the other ones, I think you haven't seen part 2 and 3 yet, but you saw the original and the remake and loved both of those. So I'm going to have to put you into part 2 and 3, which are both dope as well. This is part 4, I believe, in the franchise, so... glad to see it going on and glad to see the direction they took it. It was very grimy with the last two. Hope that these stick with that same vein and stick to that gritty kind of storytelling, because it is very just raw. You know what I mean? The kills are brutal, there's no fucks given, and there's no punches pulled. And I love that style of film and that style of filmmaking. So definitely looking forward to I Spit on Your Grave, Deja Vu. No details on a release date for this one. We just know that a sequel is in the works. I don't believe it's actually being released yet. I just think that it's actually happening, but confirmation of it has been in the pipeline. So we are happy to announce that, and to follow that story as it grows and becomes closer to the release date of the film. We'll give you guys more information on that as it gets near. That about wraps up everything for our bone-breaking news. We're going to go ahead and keep things moving into our next segment. If you need to get yourself some dairy toes, them dairy toes from dairy.
Can we not do that?
We're doing that every time now.
Stop
It's becoming a signature.
Stop.
It's really going to happen.
Nope.
But yeah, go ahead and get yourself a snack. Come right back. We'll be right back after this message.
And now, our headquarters presents your feature presentation, Vital Organs Discussion.
Alright, we are back, and this is your Vital Organs Discussion. This week we're going to be talking about the Critters franchise, obviously, so we're going to be digging into all 4 films. Before we get into the individual films themselves, we are going to be talking about some notes that we have from the films. The films that we will be recapping in this episode, or this segment rather, will be Critters from 1986, directed by Stephen Herrick, Critters 2 from 1988, directed by Mick Garris, Critters 3 from 1991, directed by Christine Peterson, and Critters 4, also from 1991, directed by Rupert Harvey. So all 4 of these films will be discussed in detail. Before we get into that, though, we are going to go over some really dope, fun trivia facts and notes that we have about the franchise. So let's get into that right away.
Pay attention.
Pay attention. So, the appearances of the Krites varies from film to film. In the first film, they appear to be much smaller than in the sequels. Same for the lead Krite, and not as furry. Their stomachs are fully revealed, whereas in the sequels, they're covered completely by fur, and their fur appears more slicked back instead of wild and spiky like in the sequels. And their teeth appear more needle-like than in the future installments. In one scene in the original film, a Krite's eyes appear to be orange instead of the bleeding red seen throughout the rest of the film, but this look is never repeated.
I've seen that.
Yeah, so I noticed this too, and I thought it was, just, I don't know, just a variation in the creature itself. I didn't necessarily think as deep as it being something totally different as far as maybe breed or just being different in film.
Yeah.
It was just something I thought that they actually intentionally included. So it didn't stand out to me as being weird or off-kilter or strange or anything like that. It just seemed pretty natural to me. So that didn't stand out as being weird to me, but in retrospect, looking at it, it does stand out as being that one scene where it does stand out as being orange because the rest is red.
Krites have been described as porcupines, rats, badgers, possums, hedgehogs, rabid cats, Tasmanian devils, and a slew of other similar creatures.
Yeah, and that's because they look so fucking weird, and people try to always give an explanation of what they are and why they're here. You know what I mean? Like, they try to logicize why there's this fucking alien thing here, so they try to turn it into a regular animal.
Well, basically, obviously, if you've seen the movie, they do shoot quills at you. So that's
they do.
The feature of the porcupine. So
they
I
do.
don't understand that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things about them definitely that stand out and make it like, okay, I understand why they would think it's that type of animal. So I definitely do see that point. But it's funny that they always get portrayed as something different than what they are. Nobody ever wants to admit they're this fucking weird alien creature. You know what I mean? Because it just seems so far-fetched.
Throughout the movie, I would say that's no critter. It's just a fuzzy gremlin.
Like furball. And we get into that later, the issues with that. So, the critters, i.e. Krites, are ravenous creatures that simply exist to eat, breed, and the main characters in the film's endeavor is to protect themselves while trying to think of ways to defeat them. The creature's effect work was done by the Chiodo brothers, who later went on to make killer clowns from outer space. So, the Chiodo brothers, we've talked about before when we did our biopic and talked about Killer Clowns from Outer Space in a previous episode, and they are actually working on a sequel to Killer Clowns right now. I would love to see them maybe come back and do a Critters 5. Yeah. You know what I mean? I think that would be really cool. The possibility is there. I mean, they did create them, and they're still directing, and they're doing one of their old films they brought back from back in the day, so it'd be great to see them helm a Critters film. I'd love to see that happen. I think that would be great.
Do you think any of the old characters would be in it, though?
I'm not sure.
I would love for them to bring back Charlie.
Yeah,
he's been in all of them.
Yeah, Charlie's been in all 4 films, and I think having him brought back in one would be very cool.
Yeah.
And I know Opper, the guy that is Charlie, the actual real guy's name, the actor's name, I think he really does enjoy the film. Because if you look at the history, I believe he started off as just an actor, then he had a writing credit or a production credit, then he went to directing, or his brother went to directing. Because I think there's a Barry Opper and Don Opper, they're both involved, and I think they're brothers. But it's very cool to see that interest build up and him get into the film more and kind of do things like that. So that would be awesome, and I would love to see that happen for sure.
Yeah. So, a planned web series never came into fruition.
Yeah, now, we actually watched the pilot episode of this, which I believe was called Bounty Hunter, Critters Bounty Hunter.
Yeah.
And, wow, I mean, for a 6-minute short, it looked phenomenal.
Yeah.
It really, really did. The effects were great. The critters looked great. They paid homage with the classic effects and the classic look of the critter. And I just overall thought that it was really well produced and impressive as hell. And I'll be honest with you, I would have loved to see a web series done by that guy, you know,
I was
continuing
going to
on.
say, yeah, it looked really good.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, he could have done something full length and it would have been impressive, because for a 6-minute short, I mean, the film quality was phenomenal.
That can be Little Critters 5. They can just do it on the freaking bounty hunter.
Yeah,
Like,
it really
that'd be
could.
awesome.
And it, you know, it fits because 4 kind of goes more into that backstory of the bounty hunters and all. You know, you kind of get hints of it in 2 and 3 as well, but they really dive into that in the 4th one. So I really do think that would be a great concept, and I love the idea that they did for that little short. I think it was really well done, great effects, and major kudos to the guy that directed. I should have looked up his name. I believe it was Jordan something. That rings a bell in my mind for some reason. Jordan something, but what a fucking cool short flick, and what a great homage to Critters. Really cool short indeed.
It's really impressive.
It was.
Yeah.
So, in the first film, the largest Krite took leadership over the others. This is carried over into the second film, where though later turning out to be Ugg in disguise, the largest Krite was seen as the leader once more, being able to persuade the immense pack of smaller Krites to continue on to the polar iceberger instead of attacking the humans that were following behind them. Although the concept of the biggest Krites being the leader was dropped in Critters 3, the Krite whose face was burned by bleach is shown leading the group throughout the most of the film. This is the last Krite to be killed as well. Because the 4th film only has 2 main Krite characters, it is difficult to determine if a lead Krite is being suggested. Although the one Krite, the one that has the top of its head burned by Charlie when it's a hatchling, is shown as ordering around the other critters. So basically, there's always a lead Krite, or, you know, critter basically, always taking the lead of the group of the rest. And now this seems to be true with a lot of small critter movies and small creature movies. There always does seem to be a leader of the pack or leader of the group, which is cool. But it does seem to be like a signature thing that it does occur in a lot of these movies. And this is no different, with all 4 of the Critters movies kind of having, you know, somewhat of a clear-cut leader in each one of them, especially the first 2.
Yeah.
Typically with the leader being the larger of the group.
Yep. The later science fiction film Alienator from 1990 has a similar plot to Critters. In that film, an android assassin called the Alienator goes to Earth to hunt down an alien criminal who has escaped from a prison planet. Whoa.
So, yeah, basically this is, you know, a film that has an extremely similar plot to Critters that came out in the same era, that gets compared to it a lot, that I thought was an interesting piece of trivia, that I, you know, have not really been familiar with this film too much until reading into it, but after you do look at the two and compare them, especially the time frames, the plots, and characterization and storyline and things like that, it does sync up very well with Critters, and it does definitely look like a lot of the concepts were derivated from that, which is cool, because a lot of times I feel like that's a homage to those directors and those films, and that's just a way to pay respect. There is a difference between straight out plagiarizing and, you know, giving an ode, and I do agree with that, but I don't think it was exactly a direct rip. I think it just paid heavy homage to it more than anything.
Yeah.
So the last fact we have here is Billy Zane made his second film appearance in the first film of the franchise as a side character.
Oh.
So Billy Zane, you know, popularly known as the Phantom among many other characters that he played. I believe he was in The Mummy and a few other films. He's had a very extensive career, and it's funny to see him super young in this role, and one of his earliest films, and just seeing him like basically as a kid in this role was really, really cool. And it's funny to see how many actors get their start. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kevin Bacon and Johnny Depp and Billy Zane and countless other actors and actresses have gotten their start in early horror films, and I think that's really fucking cool. So no different here, having Billy Zane appear in one of the Critters films. Very, very cool. Definitely an interesting fact indeed. That about wraps up the film series notes that we have here. We're going to dive in and get into the films in just a moment, but before we do that, we have a special ad this week from Serial Killer Magazine, a very cool company that we reached out to recently and are working with behind the scenes right now. So we're going to go ahead and dive into that. Don't go nowhere. We'll be right back in just a second.
the most brutal magazine you'll ever read. With a limited time sale right now, all 26 issues of Serial Killer magazine for just $260. Ebooks, trading cards, exclusive Serial Killer books, specialty issues, and more. Visit serialkillercalendar.com. That's serialkillercalendar.com. Featuring artwork, facts, trivia, documents, transcripts, memoirs, and more. Serial Killer Magazine, the most murderous publication on planet Earth.
That's right. Make sure you check that out. Definitely a dope magazine. Phenomenal artwork. Very enjoyable material. So we are going to go ahead and get further into this Vital Organs discussion. We're going to be breaking down the first film of 4 in this franchise, and that is the original Critters from 1986, directed by Stephen Herek. So, got some cool factoids about this one. We're going to go ahead and get right on into it. No need in slacking and slouching. So, Corey Burton, who voices the Critters, also came up with their language, which is described in interviews as combining elements of French and Japanese.
Whoa.
Yeah, so this is basically the concept behind the way they speak and deliver their vocals is a mixture of 2 very different languages that have unique sounds to each one of them, and combining them together and changing the voice more high pitched to give it that sound.
That's pretty cool because I don't know either one of them. So if this had never happened, it's like I would have never known.
Yeah, if you know, if you can't speak French and you can't speak Japanese, you're not going to pick up on the hints of either one of those, and I speak neither, so I never even caught that at all. But I think it's very cool to know the inspiration behind it and what kind of made them choose to make them sound that way and why they did it like that.
Yeah. So, although promoted as New Line's answer to Gremlins from 1984, the screenplay had been written and bought before Gremlins was announced. Whoops.
Oh no!
Herrick had based the screenplay on a nightmare he experienced as a child long before Gremlins was even conceived.
Yeah. Yeah, so we've talked about this before about the issues between Gremlins and Critters, and people saying it was a bite off, but it's been refuted repeatedly by the director that this was already penned well before that even came out. So just an interesting factoid for people that want to say that Critters bit Gremlins. It fucking didn't. I'm here to defend Critters, motherfucker. No, I enjoyed Critters. I did enjoy it, so I did think it was a dope film, and I could see why people would compare it to Gremlins, the small creature era. But that era period had a lot of films. Gate, Ghoulies, Gremlins, Critters, Hobgoblins, Troll. You know what I mean? There's a slew of little creature horror movies that came out in that era. Even more than that. That's just a handful. But Puppet Master. I mean, there's a ton of them. So it was nothing new. Nothing new at all. It was just another film of that era. So I think it was a bit of a reach for people to complain about them being exactly copies or whatever. But I could see some of the similarities in there as well. Speaking of which, the critter emerging from the toilet is likely a homage to Ghoulies from 1985, a similarly themed movie that used small monsters coming out of the toilet as their marketing strategy to promote the film. Mm-hmm. So anybody that's familiar with Ghoulies knows about the infamous toilet scene with the ghoulie popping out, and that happens once again with Critters. And yeah, I definitely do agree that probably is a nod and homage to Ghoulies as well. Or a possible coincidence. I've seen toilets used as well in many other horror movies. Killer Clowns from Outer Space being noted as one, and many others that use bathrooms. So having something come out of the toilet isn't completely original. It's been done many a times, but it very well could have been a nod to Ghoulies, which came out very similar time and also very similar theme. So I could see that for sure being the case.
When the Critters are destroying the bedroom, one comes across an E.T. extraterrestrial from 1982 vinyl plush toy and devours it. This adds to the satire of the film, referencing and homaging Hollywood's monster boom with films like Gremlins, Ghostbusters, and Ghoulies.
So, yeah, basically with this is another nod to all the classic films that they reference throughout this movie. And we noticed this when we were watching the Critter films, that there's 100 nods to different classic films, especially of that era, throughout all the films. And it's definitely a cool kickback, and it's very, kind of like Stranger Things, where you get a lot of, cool nods to the 80s throughout the flicks, and they do that in the show, kickbacks to movies from the 80s throughout the show, and they do that also in this movie to different things of pop culture of that time. And I just love when films do that, or TV shows for that matter. So it's very cool to see Critters have a bunch of nods to films of that era, because it really was the golden era of horror films, the 80s for sure. And I just thought that was really cool for them to have shout outs in there like that, nods to those films. This is also the second movie, the other being E.T., the extraterrestrial, with Dee Wallace, in which her son heats up an oral thermometer in order to appear sick and avoid going to school. So that's kind of cool, and I also think that's definitely a nod to E.T. 100% by having Dee Wallace in here and doing, having the son do the same exact thing in a much later film. That's 100%. A kickback to E.T. without a doubt. So I really thought that was awesome, and I did not really even think about that fact until I seen that. And I've seen E.T. and Critters before, but I never even thought about putting those two and two together until we read up on this fact. So I thought that was really cool.
There were only 2 deaths on screen. All other characters are just harmed, quote unquote.
So, yeah, this film doesn't have a high body count, and honestly, most of them throughout do not have a high body count. I think the highest body count on one of them was 7, and I think that was part 4. Now, this franchise has managed to keep a very low body count and still be able to have terror and attacks happening throughout all the films, which is really cool. There's not a lot of films that can get away without having kills and still being able to have something terrifying and menacing. And I think that Critters really achieved that and was really cool for its time, especially because, like I said, this is a film from '86, so it was a little bit more terrifying when it first came out. It wasn't as comical as it is now, even though they do embellish the comic feel a little bit more in the sequels to Critters, which definitely appears fluently throughout later on. But yeah, I thought that, that's not that, many kills throughout that franchise. There's probably only 15 kills, I'd say, because you only have 2 in this. There's 7 in the one, that's 9. And between the other 2, I bet you there's probably only 6 or 7 more kills. So you're probably looking at 15, 20 tops kills throughout 4 movies, which is a pretty low account. That's about 5 a film. You know what I mean? Which is a pretty low total when you compare it to other films of this, this genre and of this time period for sure. So definitely on the lower end of the body counts. The next thing we have here is at around 49 minutes, when the rest of the family drags their father through the front door of the house, he's attacked a second time. A crew member is very clearly visible through a window at the back of the shot. Got that ass busted. So we've talked about continuity issues. I always like pointing these out because they're fun little things to find and check out in a film. So if you get a chance, that's around 49 minutes. Check that little spot out. That is definitely something worth looking at and catching. And it's always fun, like I said, to catch those little continuity mistakes and little flaws in a film. I do like finding things like that.
Yeah. The bounty hunters leave Earth at the end of the film in a different spaceship to the one they arrive in. In fact, it is the same model used for the ship in the Critters arrived and attempted to leave in.
Yeah, so the ship that the Critters come in and try to dip out in is the same one that the bounty hunters come in.
Okay.
So, the one that they leave in at the end of the film.
Okay, that makes sense.
But the one that they arrive in is different.
Yeah. Yep.
So that once again is probably a mistake on the continuity department. Basically, the same ship that the bounty hunters came in is the same one that the Critters were in. But if you think about it, also, that ship was stolen. If you remember, they hijacked that ship.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that necessarily means it's a continuity issue or they're just, relegating to the fact that that's the, place where they stole it from. Yeah. It could have been either way, but once again, just an interesting little factoid to kind of nail down a little bit of a storyline in Critters. So that wraps up about all the facts that we actually have for the first Critters film. We will be diving into the second one in just a moment. Before we get into that, though, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the film itself and our thoughts on it and give our ratings on it. So, I like this one. I like the Critters film, and I think even with the low death count and the minimal gore in it, it's very fun. It's schlocky. It has the super cheesy 80s vibe, but it's an enjoyable old small creature feature. You know what I mean? A real classic from the 80s, a gem that stands out, and really is just a fun, enjoyable flick. And it doesn't have a lot of serious undertones to it so much. It's a little more schlocky in the sequels, but this one, it kind of has a serious vibe to it, but it has some comedic tones to it, which makes it, enjoyable for me. And I do like when comedy is added to horror films, and I think the creatures themselves do have a comedic tone and feel to them for sure. Mainly with how they talk and communicate with each other, and just like the way that they kill. I mean, it's so hard to take something that small killing serious, but they are these crazy little fucking furred beastie little creatures with these porcupine fucking spikes they can shoot out and razor sharp teeth.
Oh yeah.
So it does make sense, and they definitely do their job in becoming a creature to stand out and be something to be feared.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I like Critters. I think it's a real classic. I'm giving this one 2 thumbs up for sure.
Same.
I think this is a real fun film and definitely enjoyable. Definitely check this one out if you haven't. Critters from 1986, directed by Steve Herrick. I'm giving this one 2 thumbs up. You are agreeing, so that's 4 total thumbs up for this one. We both like this one. Yeah, I think this is just a really, really fun film and a real gem of the era for small creature feature films, and a real fun small monster flick. So yeah, Critters is an absolute classic. Now we're gonna go ahead and keep it moving into the second flick in the franchise, which is the classic Critters 2, also called The Main Course, I believe is the subtitle to it. Yeah. This is from 1988, directed by the legendary Mick Garris, and this one was a ton of fun. I really liked part 2. This one featured the giant ball of critters, which was really, really fun and something interesting. But before we get into our thoughts on the film here, we have a lot of cool facts about Critters 2 that we're going to go ahead and dive into right now. So, from New Line Cinema's trademark, Lynn Shay has a role. Lynn Shay is the younger sister of founder of New Line Cinema, Robert Shay. She can be found in countless New Line films, including this one, and other examples include A Nightmare on Elm Street, Dumb and Dumber, and Critters, etc. So we talked about this the other day with her being in Kingpin, and she was obviously in A Nightmare on Elm Street, and a bunch of other movies, and just plays, the greatest characters every time, like super weirdo characters and just offbeat, and like she's like the fucking female Clint Howard, and I love that. And Clint Howard's a total weirdo too, and I love Clint Howard. I just love these offbeat, strange characters, and Lynn Shay, she is a staple. Like nowadays, she's in the Insidious films and a lot of other cool stuff, but I love seeing her in things, and I did not realize and think about her being related to Robert Shay. I should have known that. But that is cool that she is the sister of his. I thought they were related through marriage originally, but I guess I was wrong about that. But yeah, Lynn Shay appearing in Critters 2, very, very cool stuff, and her character is totally fucking outrageous in it. Over the top, and like, I don't know if you remember, but the scene where like they show her one scene, she has like a real thick coat of lipstick on her lips, and that shit is so far off of her fucking lips. It was
going outside.
Yes, yes, you noticed that too. Yes. I totally thought that was like it had to be intentional. It had to be intentional.
I was like, why is her lips going like outside her lips?
Yeah, the fucking lipstick was thick as fuck. Like it looked weird,
excessive,
like clown style. But I love Lynn Shay, and seeing her in this was super cool. So very awesome.
The props they use for the eggs are sugar apples.
Yeah. Now I looked into this. Apparently, sugar apples are like this. I don't know if it's actually a fruit or what, but they are like this fleshy, fruit-looking ball that's like an octave, like an oval, kind of like an oval, rough shape that is, I don't know, it's...
I guess I should have looked in... I don't know.
It's hard to explain. It's like a
It's like a fruit, but
it's
could
like
be
a small
candy.
pineapple almost. It looks like a small pineapple, but like rough, kind of rough on the outside and more greenish. And I guess they removed like the stem from it or whatever and painted them and made the eggs for them, which is really cool. And knowing that makes me want to get a fucking sugar apple and make a legit replica of one of the movie fucking eggs.
We gotta make sure those don't like rot.
Spoil,
right?
yeah. Or see if there's a way to dehydrate it and dry it out. But I thought that was
would be pretty
really,
cool, yeah.
I thought that was really fucking cool. So this was David Tui's first writing credit. He goes on to pen Waterworld, G.I. Jane, and all the Chronicles of Riddick films.
Whoa.
Yeah, so what an extensive career and what a way to start. What a great first writing credit too, because Critters, like I said, I do love these films, and I think the continuity between the four is great. Even though they had 4 different directors and even different actors throughout, I think the continuity and the storyline that they kept throughout and having the bounty hunters really laid well, and having the Charlie character come back repeatedly really awesome. Laid well with me too. And I think that, you know, that really does make these films kind of stand out, is the great cohesive continuity that they do have between them. I think that kind of sets it apart from a lot of other sequels of the era, is they lose that in not only the storyline but the actors as well, and you kind of get that continuity between these, especially in the first 2 Critters.
A cardboard cutout of Freddy Krueger appears in the film. Both Critters 2 and A Nightmare on Elm Street are New Line Cinema properties. This film was exclusively produced by Robert Shaye, and Robert Shaye is also the co-founder of New Line Cinema.
So, yeah, basically, this film and, you know, A Nightmare on Elm Street both come from New Line. So, they had little ties between both of those films used throughout, and I think that's really cool when companies do that. Robert Shaye obviously allowed that to happen, and that is just awesome. That's a cool little factoid that they have shared things like that. And we talked about Carpenter, I think, and Romero doing things like that, where they would have things from each other's films. Or maybe it was Kraven and Carpenter. I think it was Kraven and Carpenter. Or no, Kraven and Romero. There was 2 other directors we talked about that had a very similar thing where they were doing that with each other's movies. But I always love when things like that are in there. Little Easter eggs and nods to each other's films and work. That's always very cool to me. So Mick Garris had wanted to get Frank Welker to do the voices of the Krites, but he couldn't afford to get him. So he ended up for doing the most of the voices himself and hiring a loop group to provide additional vocals for them. Now, I didn't know that Mick Garris did the vocals for the creatures in this, the Krites. I thought that was very cool.
Yeah.
That was something that I didn't find out until we read up on it, but that is a really cool fact, you know what I mean? And it's awesome to me when directors get hands-on like that. And I've noticed dudes like Band and Garris and Hooper and a lot of other hard directors will really get hands-on with their projects and get involved to make sure that things happen, even if they have to do them themselves. And I always appreciate that, and I think that's always a salute to making films and making a great film, is having the director get a little bit more hands-on involved and really help push things together for a project to make it successful.
Yeah. The Playboy magazine Charlie finds is the issue from March 1979. It is shown that the female form Lee takes is the centerfold for the issue. However, the actress that played female Lee, which was Roxanne Kernahan, was never in Playboy magazine. The centerfold for that issue was Denise McConnell.
So basically, the actress that his character turns into, is not actually the actress or the model from the Playboy magazine.
It's like the model look-alike.
Yeah, they basically just got somebody that looked like that chick and dressed her up to make her look like her even more.
Yeah.
To portray that role, which, you know, is understandable.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, there's no guarantee they could have got a hold of the chick. There's no guarantee that she wanted to be involved in the movie, and maybe she didn't want, that much popularity drawn to herself, more so than already being in the magazine.
Yeah.
Because at that time, I don't know. Actually, at that time, Playboy was probably actually more popular than it is now, to be honest. Playboy, you know what I mean?
Internet.
Yeah, Playboy. Yeah, because the internet is definitely taking over now. But yeah, I thought that was a really, really interesting fact and definitely cool for sure.
Yeah.
The film is included on the film critic Roger Ebert's most hated list.
Oh no.
Yeah, so Ebert fucking slammed this one and hated this film. But cool little interesting fact, Siskel and Ebert loved the original film and praised it and gave it 3 out of 4 fucking stars, but hated this one. So, and it blows my mind that they even like the first one, because they are kind of fucking dick critics.
Oh,
you know what I mean? And I respect their opinion. You know, they watch a lot of film, but just because you watch a lot of film doesn't necessarily mean that you're a great critic. But I respect their opinions on film, and I can understand why they would slam this one. But I like this one. You know, me personally, I did enjoy Critters 2, so I thought it was an interesting fact that, you know, Ebert fucking slammed this one and said, fuck this film. It's on his most hated list. Now, I'm curious to see what other films are on his most hated list. I should look that up and see what other films happen to be on that list.
Yeah, and this next fact I actually noticed, and I pointed this out to you earlier. The bounty hunters' names are Ugg and Lee, or ugly when put together. Yeah. And I was like,
oh shit. So I didn't even notice this myself, but when we went researching this, that was one of the facts that I seen him talking about in that documentary, because I watched some behind the scenes featurettes about Critters, and that was one of the things that I seen in there, was them talking about that, and I thought that it was a really cool factoid, and it was something that I also read on IMDb as well. So it was definitely a legit fact that has been documented, but very cool that was the little inside joke, you know, ugly with Ugg and Lee together. So I didn't even notice that, and it's super obvious, but I didn't even notice that until I went back and read the facts. So, the little girl riding her tricycle while being chased by the critters behind the church is perhaps a homage to the little girl on a tricycle at the beginning of A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors. Both girls are wearing yellow dresses. So,
I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, so this is a really, really slick Easter egg, if that is indeed the case, with the homage being paid. And I do very vividly remember the scene with the girl in the yellow dress when I was a kid from Nightmare on Elm Street as always being one of the creepiest fucking scenes. Oh. And it's very cool if that is indeed the fact that it is a homage to that, which makes sense because they are both New Line films. And like we said, there is a lot of crossover things like that between things at New Line. So I think it's definitely potentially possible that is what was going on there, and it was a nod to A Nightmare on Elm Street. But a very cool fact indeed, and I think that is pretty fucking cool. One of the more interesting facts that I looked up that I didn't necessarily know about or see myself, a very cool Easter egg that wasn't exactly blatant or out in the obvious, but very cool nonetheless.
When Lee's appearance is turned from being a quote-unquote nothing face into the Playboy centerfold model, a staple, although oversized, also materializes on Lee since it was visible when the picture of the centerfold was looked at. But when Lee's appearance changes from that of the model into the hungry heifer manager at around like 50 minutes, I guess, glasses do not materialize on Lee's face, even though the restaurant manager was wearing them at the time.
Yeah, so that's a cool little fact where it was basically not necessarily a continuity issue in something being there, but something that should have happened.
Yeah.
You know, basically, you remember that because we talked about that, like, what the fuck is that? Oh, it was the staple that she pulled out of her stomach. Remember that scene?
Yep.
So, remember when he takes the characteristics of the other person, he should have had their glasses.
Yeah.
If it was an exact copy, I mean, he even got the stomach staple when he transformed from the female. But he didn't get the glasses when he transformed from the other person. So, just a little continuity issue there that they should have fixed and nipped in the bud, but apparently they didn't. But shit like that happens. It is to be expected. It's nothing that, much out of the ordinary. We do talk about continuity issues a lot because they are interesting and they are cool, and it's definitely something that you can, keep an eye out for, or something that, just a nice little tidbit of information to know.
Put a Band-Aid on it and move along with life.
That's right. So, the last fact that we have here about Critters 2 is throughout the movie, whenever the critters roll, you can see the wires pulling them.
I didn't.
Now, I didn't notice this either, and believe me, I was actually looking for that because I was like, man, I wonder how they did that. I think some of the scenes for having things go up the steps were just them dropping down the steps in reverse, which is a cool little tactic to do it without wire.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? On a cheap budget, which is a smart idea, but I really did not see any wires throughout the film, and I did look. So I'm gonna have to, watch it again, I guess, and really keep a sharp eye out for that.
I thought they were like little remotes, like
Yeah.
little cars and whatnot.
Yeah, they could have, nowadays technology, they could definitely pull off something with RC, I'm sure, but I didn't see any strings or anything when they did that, so I didn't.
Really thin wire.
Yeah, I didn't catch that shit, so very interesting indeed. So that wraps up about all the facts that we have about Critters 2 from '88, directed by Mick Garris. However, we are going to talk a little bit about the film before we move into part 3. So, Critters 2, this one is a real fun romp, and, it has, like we mentioned in the beginning, it has, Mick Garris directing and helming, and also the awesome fucking giant critter ball, which is to me one of the coolest things about the series and one of the things that stands out the most. I've talked with a lot of people in the group about this, that is one of the most memorable scenes from the franchise as a whole, is that scene, and I love that concept of that critter ball just rolling through the city, and I wish it would have been used more in the sequels. Unfortunately, it did not get used again. It was a one-time thing, but it was very cool indeed seeing it be used.
I think I mentioned that it made my skin crawl because I remember as a kid, I've seen a bunch of like spiders grouped together, and that's exactly what it reminded me of, and it was like, ugh.
Deja vu.
Yes.
So, yeah, Critters 2 for me, I'm going to go ahead and give this one as well 2 thumbs up as well. I think it is a good one, an enjoyable one, great entry into the series. And it's, for me, one of the ones that really does stand out of the 4 flicks as being one of the best ones. This and the first 2 are probably the best out of the 4.
Yeah.
But I do really like this one, and I do think that it is a really fun one. So I'm going to give this one the 2 thumbs up. What is your thoughts on this one?
I gotta give it the 2 thumbs up because of the little critter ball. Like I said, I like to see it bounce, and I'm just like, does none of them get hurt when they bounce?
Yeah,
like,
definitely. Yeah, that fucking thing was rocking and rolling as it came down the hill. So
exactly.
It is an interesting question, but I doubt that. I think they're pretty damn resilient. They seem to be pretty resilient when they fight and attack. So I don't think that what they were taking was too much to damage them, but. Critters 2, definitely 2 thumbs up from us. We enjoyed that one. A fun flick indeed. The plot and the story in it is basically a continuation from the first one. The main character comes back to the town and is trying to live a normal life, but of course the critters are found. The eggs from the end of part 1 are found, and just all hell breaks loose and the town is shredded. So it's basically a continuation of part 1 that seems to take place just a few months or a couple years later. It's hard to tell the exact timeline stamp on that, but it is a fun sequel, definitely enjoyable. So Critters 2. And that brings us into the third one, which we don't have a ton of information about this one, but we do have some fun facts. So we're going to go ahead and get into Critters 3 from 1991, directed by Christine Peterson. So this is little Leo DiCaprio's fucking feature film debut.
Yeah, I looked over and was like, this little boy had to be like gorgeous all his life.
Jesus Christ.
Like, come on. Yeah, so
little Leo DiCaprio is probably, I guess, 12, 13 maybe in this. Plays a snobby little shit. And his dad's a total fucking, his stepdad. Remember? He's not my dad, he's my stepdad.
Yep.
His stepdad's a total fucking douchebag character.
Yeah. Fucking
scumbag slumlord of an apartment owner. But yeah, this one definitely was pretty bugged out. You also have the Charlie character coming back again. But before we get too much into the discussion of this one, let's go ahead and lay down some facts on this one. I'm going to let you take it off from here.
Shot simultaneously with Critters 4 from 1992, from February 1991 until July 1991.
So this is something that we actually kind of discussed. Remember we mentioned it was really strange that both these films came out the same year?
Yeah.
That's because they were filmed together at the same time. That's why they came out in the same year. So
how did they do that? Like, focus on like 2 movies at once?
Yeah, I think that's pretty crazy too. And I've heard about other films doing this method where they'll do a couple sequels right back to back and they'll film them together. I can imagine that being very difficult to splice and keep the footage separate and keep the the acting different to specific films. But I don't know. I can see how it works, but I could also see the difficulties in it. But it is very interesting indeed, a way for them to film things simultaneously. So interesting fact with Critters 3 and 4, that's how they were filmed. Also, Terrence Mann's appearance as Ugg is credited in the movie's end credits before he even appeared in the movie. He only makes a short appearance in a scene running during the end credits, which ties the actions of this movie with the sequel, Critters 4 from 92. Mm-hmm. So that little tiny segue of him in there, he's actually credited for, even though it's just like a minute part and is more or less a flashback scene.
Yeah.
So it's a very small part, but Ugg does appear in all 4 films, which is, similar to Opper's role, who also, Charlie, who also plays in all 4 films as well.
Yeah. Billy Zane previously appeared in the first Critters from 1986. Sorry. Both Billy Zane and Leonardo DiCaprio would later co-star in Titanic, which is 1997.
Yeah, so Titanic is, a blockbuster smash, and everyone knows that film. And Zane and DiCaprio both had big roles in that film, so it's kind of cool that they also starred in this way back in the day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Not, in the same film, but in the same franchise of films. That's still very cool, and just a neat little segue in Hollywood, how things like that actually happen.
Yeah.
When the camper has a flat tire, you can briefly see flames indicating there was a charge to flatten the tire. A tire bursting doesn't cause flames. So the tire was supposed to just be busting naturally or from impact from a critter or whatever. When he gets the flat tire. However, you see flames come out as if it were shot or something. So just a continuity issue there. With something not necessarily happening the way it should have happened, which is the opposite of what we talked earlier, where something happens where it should have been different. This is just something that didn't happen the way it should have. So, very cool little factoid to notice if you were watching the film and noticed, if you've ever had a flat tire, you would know that that's not how it happens. You don't actually have flames coming out. So, something to notice if you were watching and paying attention.
When Annie's dad is hit for the first time by a spike of the critter, there is a spot on his hand where the spike is about to hit.
So I guess with this was basically them wanting to have a marker on the set for where the spike was going to land and come out of the hand. So they had this fucking, spot on the hand that can clearly be seen in the scene. So if you pay close attention, you will see a marker on his hand, a spot on his hand where the little spike goes. So that's just something, once again, kind of a continuity thing, but more or less something that they had to do to make sure that things landed correctly and things lined up properly for the scene. It makes sense, but it is funny to notice things like that. So Cary Elwes mentioned on the commentary for the uncut edition DVD of Saw that he passed on the role of Josh. So the little kid, the boy, DiCaprio, he passed on that role. Cary Elwes is the guy from the original Saw and from Princess Bride Diaries. And he was also the killer in American Crime, the TV show host.
Oh.
He passed on the role DiCaprio took as a kid. So could you picture him playing that role? No. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It would be a bit of a different film for sure. So interesting fact with Cary Elwes, who I'm a huge fan of and I do like his work, but it would have been weird seeing him play that because he would have been a little bit older at that time and he didn't quite look that young because around that time he did Princess Bride Diaries and he was a fucking grown man at that time. So he's a little bit older than DiCaprio. So I think DiCaprio fit that role for the age a little bit better at that time for sure.
Yeah. Review aggregation website Rotten Tomatoes gives the film an approval rating of 0%. Based on the reviews from 6 critics with an average rating of 2.8 out of 10.
That is pretty fucking pitiful. And, I gotta say, this probably is the weakest one out of the 4, to be honest with you. But I do like the apartment complex scenes, you know what I mean, where they're loose at and shit, and seeing the douchebag landlord get, wiped out. It has some cool spots in it, but out of the 4, it's probably the weakest link for me personally. So I definitely see why, it's got such a low rating. But damn, 0% and a 2.8 on average from the 6 critics reviewing, that is pretty fucking pitiful. That means the average, there's things that were under 2.8 in the rating, so I almost feel a little bit bad for them in the filming of their movie here with Critters 3 because it got fucking slammed in the ratings.
Yeah.
So the ending credits for the film feature a goofy line stating no critters were harmed in the making of this movie.
You pointed that out. That was funny.
Yeah, now I noticed this, and I also read this fact later on, but I also noticed this when we watched it all the way to the end, that it did have that little fun line in there. And I don't know if I mentioned this earlier. I know there was another film at the end. There was a scene where they have critters laughing at the end of one of them. I don't know if that's the fourth one. It might have been the fourth one. But at the end, there's at the post-credit scene where you hear a critter laughing at the end. So I think it's kind of to show that they're coming back or they're still alive. So that was a very cool nod. But that about wraps up the facts that we have for Critters 3. We're going to go ahead and talk about this one briefly for a minute. So Critters 3 from 1991, directed by Christine Peterson. This one takes place in the city and mainly in an apartment complex, and you have these very douchebaggish characters that, basically get chewed up and spit out by the critters. And then you've got a few fun characters. Like I was actually pulling for the heavyset lady, like we mentioned. I was hoping for her to live, and she did pull off for a little while. I think she actually made it to the end. But man, the critters fucking get worse and worse as they go on. They dig into more and more people and get more and more kills as it goes on.
Yeah. And
Critters 3 definitely showcases that and showcases their brutality. This being one of their more violent ones where they're actually, being a little bit more of a nuisance than they typically are in other films where they just harm people and don't necessarily kill as many. Critters 3 kind of strays from that and goes a little bit more brutal with it, which I do like. I do think that Critters 3 is a solid flick. I'm going to go ahead and give it a fucking thumbs up. One thumbs up.
One thumbs up, yeah.
Because I don't think it's as good as the other two, but I do like it still. So I'm not going to give it a bad rating because I do enjoy it. So I'm going to give one thumb up to Critters 3. I do think it is an enjoyable watch. Definitely one to check out for the continuity if you're into the franchise as a whole. I personally like this one. What did you think about Critters 3?
I don't know. I thought it was more corny.
Yeah.
It was definitely more corny than in the first two, but it was good. I did enjoy it, and I did have a couple laughs in there, so that's what's important.
Yeah, it's more comedic.
Yeah.
It's definitely more comedic, I think, and I think that they try to draw more to that in this, which is fine, and I get that that's, something that they wanted to kind of do with the direction of the film, is have it go in a more comedic way, as far as how it was written and all, but I just feel like there could have been a little bit more in here to make it a little bit stronger. But I do enjoy this one as a solid entry. I just don't think it's quite as good as the first two. So 2 thumbs up in total from us on Critters 3. This one is definitely worth a watch. Check it out if you haven't. You can get it on the 4-disc set of Critters Collection, which is available, I believe, from New Line. But it is a very, very fun film. It's just not one of the best in the series. But that brings us to the last one, which of course is Critters 4. Yep. Which came out in 1991 as well. This one is directed by Rupert Harvey, and this one is fucking amazing to me just because I love the fact that it's in space, but what makes it amazing to me, honestly, is the cast. The fucking cast in this is sick. So you have Charlie coming back, right?
Yep.
Charlie reprises his role. Ugg reprises his role.
But he's... Yeah, I guess.
And then you have the fucking Bassmaster herself, Angela Bassett.
Shout out to Gutter Monk.
You know what I mean? Angela Bassett. And then, of course, you have Anders Hove from Subspecies. You have Brad Dourif of Child's Play fame. It's fucking chocked full of fucking cool appearances, and these are main characters.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I really, really like that. So, Critters 4, just off the break, has a great cast, but before we get into talking too much about it, we have some really cool facts about Critters 4, so we're going to go ahead and get into those right now.
Yep.
Now, all the critters from earlier movies have the infamous green goo instead of red blood. But at the climax of the movie, when Ethan kicks the frozen critter into the wall, you can mostly only see red frozen blood parts fall off the critter, no green goo.
Yep.
So they kind of ditched the idea. Now, it's possible that maybe when the blood freezes, it changes a different color. If we're looking at possibilities, that is a possibility to explain it and keep the continuity there. However, it is never alluded to that that's the reason or explained why there is a change in color of blood. I like the idea of having the green goo as the blood. And it kind of fit more for them being aliens.
Yep.
You know, I know that sometimes actually using blood can mess up the ratings of films and cause an issue, so I know sometimes they use different colors. Maybe they decide to go with blood later on in the later film because it wasn't going to be an issue with rating. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
But that is an interesting fact indeed.
Although significant dialogue and on-screen dating indicate the setting is the year 2045, Ethan's handmade calendar visibly shows August 2342.
Yeah, now this is a huge mistake that's been pointed out by a lot of people, and something that I noticed as well, that there's a 300-some year difference, or about a 300-year roughly difference in the timing of the calendar versus what is told to us in the film.
Yep.
So one is to believe whether is the calendar the accurate date and it's really 2300, or are we really in 2000 as portrayed and told in the movie?
Yep.
So this one right here was really interesting to me because it changes the storyline a little bit in the fact of when things actually happen in the timeline of the films themselves. So very cool fact, and definitely something that can, you know, change the course of the film. I don't know if we'll ever get, you know, a clear indication of what is going to be the truth of that, whether it was 2000 or 2342. So definitely interesting. All external space scenes and many of the sets are lifted from one of Don Keith Opper's earlier films, Android, from 1983. So if you remember, I talked about this when we watched the film, that the space scenes looked funny. Remember the ship and all? And that's because they're actually from a whole different movie, another movie done by the director Opper as well, called Android. So that's very cool. A lot of the sets and the space scenes were pulled from that directly. So just a really cool reuse and recycling of film, but something that I was not really aware of, honestly, until we really started researching the film. So that is a cool fact.
Yeah. The eggs Charlie finds in the beginning are supposedly eggs from Critters 3, but the critters in Critters 4 are totally different. They are smaller and have different appearances.
Yeah, there's definitely a difference between them, and, you know, the eggs do change in the way that they look, so it makes you question whether it's legitimate, you know, continuity there. But, you know, I think that's a small of enough thing that unless you're really looking to pick it out, it can be looked past. But it is an interesting fact to look at and something to mention if you are, you know, comparing the chronologic order and the continuity of the films. So a boom mic or a camera team briefly is visible at the ending, reflecting on Charlie's sunglasses and at the red button he plans on pushing. So you can basically see the crew once again in the film, and as we've mentioned before, this is something that happens a lot in the continuity of films. You know, you will see this happen time and time again, and it's nothing really that ruins the film. It's just something to take note of that happens that's interesting to point out, especially if you're cinephile and really watching the film and paying close attention to the little details and things.
Yeah. Terrence Mann and Don Keith Opper have appeared in all 4 films in this series.
Yeah, so we've talked about Charlie, and then Terrence Mann is obviously the Ugg character, and Opper is the Charlie character. So these are the only 2 characters that consistently, repeatedly appear through all 4 films, but I love that. I love when they bring back the same characters in a movie, and it's great to me that all 4 films in the franchise have those 4 characters.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of films that consistently, through every film in the franchise, have main characters repeatedly appearing. And they did that with this, and I'm glad that they did it because it does stand out. It does make it unique. And it's just another little charm to the Critters franchise as a whole for me that really makes me enjoy the films. And I love, like I said, I love that solid continuity that they really adhere to. It not just the storyline, but also having the characters come back and reprise roles from previously. So that's definitely enjoyable. There are mostly only 2 critters in this movie, and the second one gets a haircut from a laser rifle in order to separate the looks for both critters. However, this is also an obvious reference to Critters 2 from '88, where one critter gets a similar haircut from a laser rifle held by a bounty hunter. So I noticed this as well, and I wasn't sure, like, it was like a deja vu moment. If you remember from the second one, there was that scene where the top of his head got burned off.
Oh,
and then
yeah.
it happened similarly again in part 4. So that was a really cool little nod to the film itself, and something that I thought was really cool. That was, a nod and kickback to the films themselves, a direct reference to the franchise, nothing outside of it. So it's always cool when films do that, reference themselves, or kind of follow that continuity once again, as we talked about. So I really did enjoy that and thought that was a really cool little nod back to Critters 2 for sure.
This is the only film in the franchise to take place in the future, in the year 2045.
Yeah, so this one is basically a futuristic film. Yep. But as we mentioned, there is the issue with it saying 2342, which is a little bit further in the future by 300 or so years. So bit of a difference there. So there's no guaranteeing of telling where it actually is 100% set in place, but it's indicated that it's 2045, although that is contradicted later when you see that in the calendar that shows 2342. So also, Critters 4 is the only Critters movie where the critters are unable to shoot poison darts at their victims. So there is no poison darts in 4. There is no darting the victims and attacking them that way. So it is a lack of the poison darts in this one. So you get none of that poison dart action, which is a little bit of a letdown, because I think that's one of their cool things about them. You know what I mean? Really, that's their only two methods of attack, is to bite or use its needles. So by it losing those needles, it basically lost one of its main notable attack methods, which I think is strange to remove that far in the franchise as well. I could see if it would have been after the first movie, but after 3 movies of them having it, it's weird that they reverted back on the 4th one and retracted that ability. It's really strange to me, and a bit of a letdown. I was really hoping to see some fucking poison darts go down, but oh well.
At 1 hour and 40 minutes, this is the longest of the Critters movies by over 10 minutes. The original film was 1 hour and 22 minutes, and the second and third installments both clocked in at 1 hour and 26 minutes.
So yeah, I noticed this too, and we even mentioned this when we went through and looked at the times for each film when we decided to movie marathon these. That was the longest one, and it was kind of strange because typically the first one is the longest, with the sequels being shorter subsequently. However, this one kind of flipped the script and had the reverse effect going on, where basically the longest one was actually the last one and the shortest one was the original. So a little bit of a difference there, but Critters 4 was definitely cool, so I don't mind it having the length that it did. You know what I mean? Even though it was longer, it was well put together and had a lot of action and fun going on, so it didn't seem like it was as long as it actually was. Now, the first Critters movie, this is the first Critters movie where Don Keith Opper is the highest billed actor. Ooh. Now, Don Keith Opper is actually Charlie, as we've mentioned before. So he is, the highest billed actor is this one and the first one. This is the first one where he is the highest billed actor, and I believe that's because he wrote this, or his brother wrote this. I believe is the reasoning behind that. But I like the Charlie character, and I know you like the character as well. So I'm not a hater of seeing him being the highest billed character, and it makes sense, honestly, because he is a predominant character in the film and throughout the series. He's the only one. I mean, he's probably the most predominant character. He is the most predominant character throughout all 4 films, because even though Ugg is featured, he doesn't play a role as important as Charlie does. So Charlie plays the most consistent, valued role throughout all 4 films, so rightfully so, him taking a top bill actor credit in the 4th film where, his family or himself, I believe one of the two, was behind the writing of the film and involved in the making of the film. So it only makes sense to have him billed in that position, and rightfully so. So that about wraps up the facts that we have here for Critters 4. We are going to dive into our thoughts of this film individually before we give up our wrap-up on this franchise as a whole. So Critters 4 for me is definitely enjoyable. I like this one a lot. I think it was a big improvement from 3. I think they reined the franchise back in. The only thing that was shoddy about this was the space scenes where it showed the ship, but that was, because of the budget and taken from another one of Opper's films, which makes sense why they would do that. I really did enjoy this one. I love the setting. I think that it's cool that Dourif and Hove and the fucking Bassmasters in the film, Bassett, you know what I mean? So it's just a really cool cast, and you also have Charlie coming back and Ugg. It's just a really, really good put together cast. It's original and, unique, or really unique cast. And, I enjoyed this one. I'm going to give this one 2 thumbs up for me. This was definitely an enjoyable film overall. I like this one. It's probably my second favorite one in the franchise, tied close up there with Part 2 because of the Critter Ball. But this one is really, really fun. I slightly put it under the original just because the originals for me always have a special spot in my heart, and typically because they set the groundwork. But 4 is right up there. Definitely an enjoyable one. I recommend you check it out if you've not seen Critters 4. Once again, this is part of the box set that you can get that has all 4 of them in there. So Critters 4 from 1991, directed by Rupert Harvey. This one is definitely a 2 thumbs up for me. What are your thoughts on this one?
I think I'm going to give it 1 thumbs up. Like you said, the disappointment of not having the porcupine spikes and whatnot.
No porcupine, and you also didn't get the return of the ball. You didn't get that in 3 either, but I was hoping maybe one day we would get it back, and in 4 I was hoping to get that. We didn't get it. It's all good. I understand why they do it like that, and you have to have an end to it at some point, but Critters 4 is definitely an enjoyable one for us. We're going to go ahead and give our final thoughts on this franchise as a whole now, and what we thought of the films collectively as a total franchise. So, so Critters 1 through 4, I enjoyed 3 out of 4 of these highly. I thought 3 was the lackluster out of the 4, but I did think it was still worth a watch. I enjoyed all 4 collectively, like I said. I think it is a solid franchise. The continuity really plays well. The returns of Ugg and Charlie coming back is really cool. The nods to other films of the era is really cool. I love the soundtrack to the original, and I think it's cool that they included the artist in the film as well. There's a lot of great artists, actors budding careers in here, from Zane to Bassett to Dourif to Hove. So many of these actors are early in their careers in this, and I love to see that, and I love to see the great, interesting casting choices throughout all films. So, overall, I give the Critters franchise a thumbs up. I think it was a really good, fun romp through 4 films. They were all done close in years, so they have a very solid continuity there as well, in vibe and feel. I even liked the short film that we watched. I thought it was very cool. I wish it would have came into being more, but I'm glad that we ended up getting what we did. And just overall, the Critters franchise is highly enjoyable. One to get if you're a collector or a fan of the genre for sure. I think a lot of us grew up watching this one and respect it for what it is. But the Critters franchise is a fun one, enjoyable one, and I overall liked it. 2 thumbs up for me overall for this franchise. What are your thoughts on the franchise?
Overall, I can give it 2 thumbs up. I enjoyed it because it was my first time seeing it, and I often compared it to the Gremlins. So that was kind of fun. Yeah, so you could see though clearly after watching it, I'm sure that there is definite differences there that set it apart, and it's not a copycat as it's commonly referred to and thought of as. But it definitely wasn't done with that intention, and in fact was written and penned before the creation and release of Gremlins, as we discussed. So, definitely an enjoyable flick. And franchise is the Critters franchise. So check that one out if you haven't. That wraps up our Vital Organs discussion for this week. We are glad to give our thoughts on these films, and it's always fun to sit down with a franchise like this and run through and talk about it. But we have more to the show, so don't go nowhere. We're going to have a little break here and a message from our sponsored film trailer for this week. And we will be back in just a few moments' time with more horror.
The coldest hotspot in all downtown. A brothel of legend.
Why don't you lay back and let me take care of you?
A pact with Satan. They are here to make all your dreams and nightmares come true.
You think you could just burn us down? And then do what? Just walk away?
Bitches must be out your mind.
Working its way into theaters this spring.
Fucking crazy bitch, cut me!
I'm gonna choke the fucking life out of you.
Haunted House of Hookers.
What's new for you to view? Find out this week on Netflix Best Picks.
And we are back, and that is right. It is time for Netflix Best Pick.
Woo-hoo.
For this week, we have 2015's Baskin, directed by Can Evernall. I believe that's how it's pronounced, Evernall. But Can Evernall directed this film from 2015, and it's on Netflix. That's where we saw it. And I've seen this one, and it's been in my queue for a long time, but I never had a chance to check it out. And I tell you what, I'm glad we did, because this shit was brutal. It starts off with this real interesting little segue in the beginning with an altercation with a kid at a restaurant and a cop. I believe it takes place in Turkey. It's a Turkish film. And basically, it just escalates from there, and these cops end up stumbling upon like a black mass of like the satanic fucking evil porn cult, and it's just the craziest shit ever. But I really like this one. I thought it was a really, really dope film, and I thought it was a really interesting concept.
Yeah.
And it was really dark and fun. And I tell you what, for a foreign film and one with subtitles, I thoroughly enjoyed it throughout. And I think that it really stands out and is a really, really solid, fun film to check out. Really dark. Very, very dark, but enjoyable.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. Baskin. I didn't understand like a word they were saying. Like I was trying to figure out what language it was in the beginning. Like we were both like it sounded like Arabian or something.
Yeah, and you don't get a lot of subtitles either in the beginning. It's a little choppy with that, so you're not really turned into everything being said. But it does give you subtitles for a lot of it. But there's a few little spots where you don't get that, and it kind of does make it a little confusing. And if you're looking for something really dark, you know what I mean, this definitely fits that vibe and definitely delivers. So this one is a dope flick. I like I said, I really enjoyed it. It's worth a watch. It is on Netflix streaming right now for free, so check that shit out if you haven't. Definitely a grimy film. I love the story. I don't want to give away too much of it. I already told a bit of it, but I don't want to give away all the details of it. But what a real fun adventure, and just great effects work in it as well. A lot of practical stuff. Really enjoyable flick here. That is my thoughts on that one. What did you think of Baskin overall? Did you feel like it was what you expected from the cover artwork?
Honestly, no. But I didn't really judge it by, Yeah,
it's a very simple cover, with just the lock on the forehead and the eyes, you know what I mean? And I seen it for a while, and I thought it was gonna be something more cerebral based on that. Yeah. And it kind of is to an extent. It does have a little bit of the hallucinogenic kind of vibe to it, whether it's real or not. But it definitely is a little confusing with the imagery that the cover puts off. But I could see why that imagery is used as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is definitely one to check out. So that is our Netflix best pick for this week. Baskin from 2015, directed by Can Evernall. So definitely check that one out if you're into the grimy, dark, gritty type material. That about wraps up our Netflix best pick for this week. We're going to go ahead and keep it rolling and get into our next segment. Don't go nowhere. We'll be right back in just a few seconds.
Pick your poison.
Boom.
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 Boom, boom.
So it's your pick your poison. We got 2 train-based movies, as we mentioned before. Terror Train from 1980, directed by Roger Spottiswoode.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then Horror Express from 1972, directed by Eugenio Martin.
Yes.
Oh, boom.
So, these two films, so Terror Train versus Horror Express. So, these two films both obviously take place on a train, and that is why we compared them. Both also have very different storylines, though. Horror Express, which took place 8 years before Terror Train, or was directed and released 8 years before Terror Train, rather, is a bit more of a creature feature film where you have basically this wild fossil man-beast caveman Bigfoot type monster slash thing that is killing people on board and frying their brains and turning their eyeballs white until they bleed out of their skulls and eyeballs. So this is pretty intense. Horror Express is definitely a enjoyable flick for me, and definitely one that I'm glad I got a chance to check out. This was my first time watch on this one. I'd heard a lot about it over the years, never had a chance to actually check it out, but I'm glad that I did. Very brutal indeed. Now, on the other hand, Terror Train I am familiar with and had seen before, but I don't think I'd seen the whole thing. So it was cool to go back and check this one out. You have a young Jamie Lee Curtis in this, and you also have David Copperfield in here, very young. And what a fun film. This one is basically a whodunit slasher killer that takes place on a train. And, this guy's in this Groucho Marx looking mask just slaughtering people. And it's just a really fun slasher of the time and really a great piece. It's one of my favorite slashers of the era, to be honest with you. It is a really good one with a real fun twist on it. And it kind of goes the way you would expect, but it also has some interesting twist on how that all comes down. And how they actually do that. They do a great job of putting that false hope in other people and making you think that it's somebody else. So they do a great job with that, and I do think that it does stand out, especially for the era, as being one of the better slashers. The kills are pretty brutal in it. There's not a ton of gore per se, but it is very, very raw in the killings themselves. They're very cold and visceral in the killings. So one of my favorite slashers of the era for sure. Definitely a dope flick. Now, if I'm gonna have to pick between these two, that's a whole different story. Before I get into my decision on which one I'm going to go with for my Pick Your Poison, I'm going to let you talk a little bit on each of these films.
For Terror Train, you got like college students. It's like based on like a younger age group.
Yeah.
So there's that, and then with Horror Express, it's like an older age group. It's
it
kind
is
of like
pretty much all adults. There's no teenagers on board. It's a whole different crowd for sure.
Yeah, like the professional like crowd,
the blue collar crowd, the white collar crowd, the hoity toities.
So, and then seeing Jamie Lee Curtis in Terror Train, it was kind of like I've never seen her that young.
Yeah, I mean, other than Halloween and
yeah,
Fog and everything else, but
wasn't she younger?
She was a little bit younger. Halloween was in 78, so she was about 2 years younger. And then Fog was also the same year. But she does have a slightly different look because her hair being cut than what you're used to seeing in Halloween. But it's cool to see her in another horror film of that era. I mean, that's what kind of solidified her as a scream queen of the 80s. But yeah, continue your thoughts on Terror Train.
Like, another thing that I remember is, like, throughout the whole movie, they were giving, like, little spurs here and there about who the killer was and whatnot. And the whole movie, I was like, oh, it has to be the magician. He's weird. He, like, creeped me out. And he's like, he's the magician. He can make anything happen. And then it was like, spin-off. You were wrong.
Yeah, so, they did do a nice spin-off with that. Yeah. And I love that they show the magician murdered in the case, and kill your idea of who you think it's going to be.
Yeah.
That was really cool. And, like I said, this movie for me is one of my favorites. I do want to get the Scream Factory release of this. I think it has great art. And I just really want to get my hands on it. I want a Blu-ray press of this movie. I only have a DVD version of it right now, so I do want to get the Blu-ray as well as the extra features for it. So both of these are phenomenal films. Now when it comes down to this is a Pick Your Poison, so we have to pick one of these. And I'm going to have to go with Terror Train. Now I take Terror Train over Horror Express just because I'm a huge slasher fan and a Jamie Lee fan, and films from the 80s are my thing, so Terror Train to me is definitely a top pick. Horror Express is a very good film in its own right, and yes, it is done a lot earlier, so it's a little bit different, but when I have to pick one, I'm going to go with Terror Train. That is my pick for this week's Pick Your Poison. What is yours?
My pick is also Terror Train. It's like the younger crowd, like I said, so it's like college students and could it be? Is it this person? Is it that person? It's like distractions and
it's more of a whodunit. Yeah. Where Horror Express is kind of what did it, and like you said, the crowd is a little bit younger, so it's probably a little bit more relatable. So that wraps up our thoughts on the Pick Your Poison. I'm going with Terror Train. She's going with Terror Train. So Terror Train wins from 1980, directed by Roger Spottiswoode, over Horror Express from 1972, directed by Eugenio Martin. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up this Pick Your Poison and get it moving into our next segment. And we have a lot to talk about, so don't go nowhere. Get yourself a snack, a drink, whatever you need. We're about halfway through this show. We're going to keep it moving into the next segment now.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The bodies are starting to add up. Body count reviews.
So we are back with the body count reviews for this week, and we have 7 films to talk about. And there is some real, genuine classics in here. There's some that I'm very excited to talk about, including one of my favorites, which is Motel Hell. But before we get into that, we are going to be talking about Chopping Mall from 1986, directed by Jim Wynorski. Now, Jim Wynorski I recently added on Facebook, so shout-outs to him for accepting that friend request. But Chopping Mall was super-duper fun. This is one that came out in 86 and definitely has that vibe 100% working for it. I really enjoyed this one throughout. I thought it was a really fun romp. It's definitely cheesy. It's basically killer robots going haywire in a mall. They're not necessarily made to be killer robots, but they're security robots that go haywire and shit goes awry in the mall and things get crazy real quick.
Malfunction,
J5. What is happening to me? But things get really crazy really quick in this one, and I do enjoy this. I think it was a really fun film. There's not a lot of killer robot films in general, especially in this time frame, so Chopping Mall is definitely fun. I will say that the robots themselves are so fat and wide and stubby, though.
They remind me of Wall-E.
They don't exactly put off what I pictured. Like, before I saw this, in my head I always pictured, like, evil J5s from Short Circuit or something. Like, something with a little bit more height and speed, but they're not that scary looking, like, at all. They're just, like, they're kind of goofy looking, but it is a really fun film and definitely enjoyable. So check out Chopping Mall from 1986 if you haven't. I definitely like this one. I'm going to go ahead and give this one a thumbs up just for its creativity and originality. It is pretty fucking wild. The effects aren't the greatest, granted for the time and the budget. I'm sure it was the best they could provide, but this one is definitely worth checking out if you have not seen it. Chopping Mall.
Boom.
What did you think of this one?
I like the robots, so I do give it a thumbs up for me. So
yeah, I'm gonna give this 1 thumb up, not 2 thumbs up. It is enjoyable, but there's definitely some things that could use some work in it. But like I said, I know this is a lower budget film, and the soundtrack really does do a lot of saving for it too. It does have a very cool soundtrack, so I'm not going to really hate on this film. It's definitely enjoyable, so I will give a single thumb up to Chopping Mall.
boom. All right, moving on to the next movie, which is Visiting Hours from 1982, directed by Jean-Claude Lord.
The Jean-Claude Lord. Jean-Claude Lord. What a crazy name. That is a wild name. So Visiting Hours. This is the one with Michael Ironside and William Shatner. And Michael Ironside is the killer. William Shatner is this friend, boyfriend, kind of trying to be the boyfriend type character, I guess.
Yes,
I don't know. He's kind of lovey-dovey with the main chick, but basically Visiting Hours is a classic slasher. It is really fun. I enjoyed this one a lot. Michael Ironside is a total goon. I loved him in Starship Troopers and Scanners and fucking Turbo Kid and 100 other things that he's been in. We recently, checked out Turbo Kid for the first time not long ago. We both really liked that.
Yeah.
And he plays a wild character with the eye patch and that, just a total goon. And I don't know, I'm just a big fan of Ironside. I do like him in a lot of things, and this is no different. This is definitely one that's highly enjoyable, and it is definitely a classic slasher that I wish I would have checked out a little bit earlier. There is a few overacted moments in it, and Ironside is just such a creep in it, though. Like, he really is a fucking creep, his character. And that, for me, really sends it home and makes this one a really dope one worth checking out and highly enjoyable. So, if you haven't seen it yet, definitely take the time and check out Visiting Hours. I'm going to give this one... one thumb up. This is another one that I think is good. I don't think it's great, but it is an enjoyable flick. So, Visiting Hours is definitely going to get it 1 thumb up from me. An enjoyable film, and I really like the premise in it. It has a really cool little story in it, and I like that most of it's in the hospital. That's pretty cool. Just a very fun slasher for the time, and a real gem to check out for the first time. What were your thoughts?
I would give it 1 thumbs up, but I liked the fact that it had like my skin crawling, like the creepiness of, I don't know if it was like ex-boyfriend or husband or I don't even think if they mentioned that, but any movie that can do that, and any, like, you can put yourself in any situation, but I like to do it with most horror movies, so that's one thing that kind of got me like crawling. Like,
Yeah, I could see for a female that being a little bit more effective than it is for a dude checking it out, because of that invasion. Like, he's preying on women, you know what I mean? So it's definitely going to hit you differently than it does for guys. So I could see why that would be, you know, more scary and intimidating for you, especially as being a female, because that is the target of victims in the movie, specifically one woman, you know, in particular. But definitely a grimy film, and he's just totally relentless and brutal in this. Ironside is, and yeah, I like this one. So we both give this one a thumb up, 1 thumb up. This is a solid one for both of us, but not the greatest. Definitely worth checking out, though. Visiting Hours from '82, directed by Jean-Claude Laud.
Jean-Claude Laud.
Now, this next one is one of my absolute favorites. This is a movie that I grew up watching as a kid. I've seen it 100 times. It is one of my absolute favorites. I do not own it, sadly, on DVD or Blu-ray, so I would love to get my hands on a Scream Factory Blu-ray of this. The slipcover on that thing is fucking crack. It's just such a beautiful addition. I need to get my hands on one. I've been slacking on my collection lately. That's one of the films I need to pick up. But Motel Hell from 1980, directed by Kevin Connor. This one is an absolute gem. I love the story in this. I love the acting in this. You've got motherfucking Klive Kraven, old Ratzenbergers in there from back in the day. You know, he's young as shit playing a rocker in this. But Ida and Vincent, the characters of Ida and Vincent are so gooned out. And I love the idea of this, like, farm harvesting human meat. You know what I mean? It's just fucking totally bugged out. And feeding them, like hallucinogenic drugs. Like, that's so fucking raw. Like, that to me always comes off as super creepy, more so than giving any other drug, because hallucinogens can just totally alter reality for you. So I can imagine the type of shit that you would go through if somebody fucked with you and tortured you and harassed you while you're on fucking, hallucinogenic drugs. It's gonna totally fucking ruin you. So Motel Hell is a real fucking cool film. It has a really cool storyline to it of this young girl basically that gets taken in by these farmers, quote unquote, that, have this restaurant, or not really a restaurant, but a hotel, a motel rather, and they basically, are utilizing people for their own needs and harvesting their corpses, and have a fucking field of them locked away in a secret garden on their property. And just like, it's so gooned out. And I remember watching this for the first time when I was a kid, actually on TNT Monster Vision, which is hosted by Joe Bob Briggs from back in the day. And it was a TV show that specialized in horror movies, and they would basically just show horror movies. And it was, I think it was on the drive-in. I can't remember what it was called. Drive-in, I think. But he would have like the totals, these drive-in totals at the end of fucking all the kills and how the kills were, and it was just super cool. Like, I loved him hosting horror movies, and that was the first time that I ever seen Motel Hell as a kid. So shout out to Joe Bob Briggs when I was a kid for showing me that. Like, if it weren't for seeing that and me watching that show, I might not have never seen that flick. So that turned me on to Motel Hell, which is one of my favorite films. What were your thoughts on that one?
One of the parts that really stuck out to me was the garden. I mentioned that before, and it's like, why?
Yeah.
What made somebody think that this was okay? Who made you think that was okay?
Yeah. Somebody come look at this. Yeah, it is bugged out. And I mean, I like that, though. I like the strangeness of it, the uniqueness of it. There's not a lot of other movies that have something even like that in it. So yeah. I do like that, and especially for the time. This came out in 1980, so at that period of time, there wasn't anything really like that out. So props to Motel Hell. Props to Kevin Conner, the director, for really creating a classic and something that I consider a timeless horror movie. One of my favorites. It is honestly considered to be 100% one of my favorite horror films. I've even used artwork from it for my Filthy Slaughter album, which, you know, goes back to 2010. It's just really dope to fucking check this film out and revisit it again, and I'm glad we got a chance to do that, and for me to show it to you for the first time, and I'm glad that you liked it. This one actually gets 2 big thumbs up from me. I really enjoy this one overall. This is a real classic, I think, and I think it's very well done, so 2 thumbs up for Motel Hell for me. What did you think? What do you think is ratings for this?
Definitely 2 thumbs up, and it definitely makes me think twice about, like, wandering into random yards and like I don't think I want to mess with you right now. So.
Don't have a accident anywhere around Ida or Vincent. You might stumble into the wrong spot. They might come find you.
Oh my God.
They might get you though. But yeah, so Motel Hell was an absolute classic. So we both give that one 2 thumbs up. 4 thumbs total for that one. We totally enjoyed that one. Check that one out if you get a chance. Right now, it is not on Netflix or anywhere else, but I believe you can find it streaming on YouTube. So look for Motel Hell. That is an absolute classic.
Next movie is Body Bags from 1993, directed by John Carpenter, Tobe Hooper, and Larry Salkis.
So this one has multiple directors because it is an anthology. There's multiple stories. You have The Morgue, which is the main story. You have the first one, which is The Gas Station, which is basically a slasher type story.
Yeah.
The Hair, which is an extraterrestrial alien type story. And then The Eye, which is kind of a ghost story. So you get the sci-fi, you get the ghost supernatural, and then you get a straight-up slasher, plus a wraparound story with The Morgue, which is just a kooky, cool one with a lot of cameos. Now, we talked about some of the cameos in here. You have Tobe Hooper, you have Sam Raimi, you know what I mean? And then just a huge cast of characters that are throughout the movie. So this thing is absolutely star-studded. Wes Craven has a cameo in here. This thing is absolutely studded with legends throughout the film, and I love that Carpenter did that and brought a lot of people on board for this one. So Body Bags is one of the ones that I seen a lot as a kid also that I do not have, that also is on Scream Factory with phenomenal artwork. Shout out to Scream Factory too for doing fucking all these releases of all these great films that didn't prior, have Blu-ray releases, because a lot of these needed it, and I'm glad that some company is stepping up and doing that. I know there is Arrow and Vinegar Syndrome and Scorpion and Code Red and Asylum, and there's all these other companies that put out films respectively, and that's dope. But I think Scream Factory is one of the best out there. I love the way the artwork is. I love their consistent releases and their choice of titles. And it's all region, acceptable to where we're at. So, major shout outs to Scream Factory. But Body Bags, like I said, is an absolute classic. One of my favorite anthology films, one I grew up on. So, I'm going to give this one 2 big thumbs up. I enjoyed all the segments on this. I really like the gas station segment with the dude that played Louis Skolnick in there. You got the hair segment with Stacy Keach. Who does a phenomenal job of playing this guy that's going bald and losing his mind over it, and ends up getting this hair extension operation that makes him look like a fucking goon. And then The Eye is a cool one with Mark Hamill actually taking the lead role and playing a baseball player that gets an eye implant, and it ends up turning him into a psycho because it gets pulled from a killer's eye, and it basically haunts him and gives him these fucked up visions and whatnot. So it drives him to madness. So the stories in all 3 of these were super fun and enjoyable. If I had to pick a favorite story out of these 3, for me it's a tie between Gas Station and Hair, possibly with Gas Station slightly edging out just because I'm a slasher fan. But I do like the wraparound story too, which features Tom Arnold, Tobe Hooper, and John Carpenter as the main character, kind of the crypt keeper, if you will, of the story, which also reminds me of the intro, which is dope, with the fucking him with the chainsaw as the MGM lion.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean? But I really love the character in that, and I think Body Bags is an absolute classic. So 2 big thumbs up for me for Body Bags. What about you?
I'm gonna give it 2 thumbs up as well, because one of my favorite subgenres is anthology. So There's that for one, and like gas station was like one of those feels like I don't want to work at a gas station. I'm glad we're not in that time where you have to work at a gas station like that. But you got to put yourself in like situations.
Well, there's not a lot of those smaller like kiosk type gas stations nowadays. Typically now there's cameras and shit like that. Technology's a little more advanced. At the time that this was done in '93, I mean, there was cameras and shit, but I don't think they were used as widely as they are now. The technology definitely wasn't as accessible. True. So, and like I said, those kiosk type gas stations, not a lot of those exist anymore. You're right. That is a more kind of a rarity type thing. But I could definitely see, you even mentioned when you were watching this that you were creeped out by the fact of, like, that's why I don't work a nighttime job. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it makes sense because you don't want to be vulnerable or at somebody's mercy. And being alone at night, obviously, is one of those times and ways where you would be vulnerable or at somebody's mercy. So, yeah. Body Bags is an absolute classic. So, we definitely enjoyed that one overall. That's 4 big thumbs up from us overall on that one, which brings us to the next flick, which is House on Willow Street from 2016, directed by Alistair Orr. Now, this one was pretty interesting. This one was basically about a chick that gets abducted, and they end up finding out that she is basically Satan, somewhat, or a demon of some sort. And from that point on, she wreaks havoc on them and everybody that assists them with, basically kidnapping and abducting her. Mm-hmm. And it's a real interesting flick. It's a cool take on, like, possession type films, because it's more of like a home invasion, possession, action thriller conglomerate of things, really. Yeah. I mean, it has a bunch of different vibes mixed in. It's a more modern film, 2016, but it is worth a watch. We checked this one out on Netflix. I did enjoy it. I thought it was okay. I'm going to give this one 1 thumb up. I don't think it was fantastic, but I think it was at least worth a watch. The concept was pretty cool. I do like home invasion type films, and I thought having that twist of it being, a demon / devil as the culprit is very cool and an interesting little twist on that. But House on Willow Street was alright. I don't think it was great. I will give it 1 thumb up just because I like the twist on it, and it was solid in the filming and all. But I don't think that it brought anything really new to the table that was, groundbreaking per se. Nothing to give it 2 thumbs up. But I did enjoy it, and I would recommend it as a watch. What were your thoughts on this one?
I thought it was like... It kind of reminded me of a movie I saw in the past, but I still can't remember what that movie was. But it's like, why? It's like, why kidnap something? But then it's like, when you get to know the person, kind of, as long as you're with them, and then you kind of find out that they're the reason why, like, things are happening. Yeah.
Like once the reveal is there, I mean, it is pretty dope, but I don't think that, like for me, the reason I give it that one thumb up and not 2 is I just don't think that it brings enough to the table. But like I said, I do give it 1 thumb up. It is worth, checking out. But
like, it definitely could have been a lot better. Like,
yeah,
in my opinion.
What is your rating on this one?
1 thumbs up.
1 thumb up.
Yeah.
All right, so 2 thumbs up total on this one. We enjoyed it, but it wasn't the greatest film out there. Yeah. It's worth checking out. You can get it for free on Netflix, so at least check it out. But don't expect to be blown away by anything groundbreaking. But it is an enjoyable watch indeed.
We're gonna move on to Zombievers from 2014, directed by Jordan Rubin. This movie was corny.
Now, that Jordan Rubin name rings a bell to me. That possibly might be the same guy that did that Critters, because I mentioned that being a Jordan name, and Jordan Rubin sounds familiar. So it is possible that the same dude that did Zombievers did Critters, because they're also very similar, the movement of those, and it is similar idea. So that is possible. I'll have to look into that. But yeah, Zombievers is...
This is one of those movies that they would air on Sci-Fi.
Yeah.
Like, you got zombie beavers, obviously. So there's that could... Sci-Fi right there. And it looks really cheeseballish.
Yeah, it's really, really, really cheesy. I'm going to go ahead and say that this one was... I know what it was trying to do. It's definitely satire, and it's okay. I would have to give this a thumbs down, though.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say this one. You know, if you want to really watch it, if you really want to just to laugh at something, there's a few funny parts in it, but it's nothing really worth watching. Honestly, I'm gonna go ahead and say pass on this one. If you really like the concept, give it a watch. But this isn't something you're gonna want to take time out of your day and really sit down and enjoy. Because you probably won't. It's not that great. I don't know. I was kind of let down by it. I knew it was going to be a jokey kind of film, but I don't know. It was not exactly what I was thinking it was going to be. But yeah, it was not that great.
I feel the exact same way. Like, it did give, like, I did chuckle. I did have a laugh here and there, and that's, like, the only, like...
redeeming factor.
Yeah, kind of, so... thumbs down as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't give it 2 thumbs down because I think it was total shit, but I do think that it definitely could have been a lot better than it was. It had a few laughing points and, you know, a couple cool little kills in it, but nothing that was that great and definitely not worth buying, in my opinion. So I'm going to pass on Zombievers. But that brings us to our last one in our body count reviews, which is one that I actually really did like, and that is Pieces from 1982, directed by Juan Piquer Simon.
Whatever.
Pumbaa and Timon.
That's Timon.
Timon, Pumbaa.
Just stop.
I
You've
know.
never even seen the movie.
It doesn't matter. I'm the king of the lions.
No, you're not.
So, alright. Pieces from 1982. This one is really cool. This is a slasher flick that I've heard about for years. It is not what I thought it was going to be. Like, I kind of knew the premise of it, but when I watched it and when I seen it, it wasn't what I had thought up in my head over the years. Because I'd seen this movie for years and years. The cover artwork, heard people talking about it, discussions. This is my first time checking it out. And it's not what I thought it was going to be, but I liked it. I really liked it. And I thought that the kills were cool. It was brutal. I love the tagline in it. I love the music in it. I think that it's just a really great 80s slasher, and it's became one of my favorites instantly, to be honest with you. I love the backstory on it and just the gooned out fucking family with how they treat the kid, and you know what I mean? Like, he's a little weirdo himself, but you know, I love that beginning, and I love those type of stories where like family revenge and shit like that. So Pieces was really dope to me. I highly enjoyed this one. This is one that I do not have in my collection physically. I think we checked this one out on YouTube as well. Yeah. I've seen it on a few other sites streaming, which you can find it there, but Pieces is fucking dope. Like, I highly recommend this one to you if you haven't checked it out before or haven't seen it. This is one that is just seriously brutal. It's just really grimy kills, and I mean, it's chainsaw action, so what do you expect? You know what I mean? It's gonna be grimy. But Pieces for me, 2 thumbs up. I really like this one. Cool storyline, you know what I mean? It's a slaughter fest on a school campus, so very fun one, enjoyable. I love this shit. From 1982, definitely fits that vibe. Cool soundtrack, very cool film. Great little twists and turns in it. Highly enjoyable.
I like the fact that it took place in like somewhere that you don't usually would like think of. Nobody thinks that somebody would kill somebody in a public area or something like that. Yeah. So there was that, and then like at the end, the twist. It was like it definitely had your mind working of who the killer was, who. So. And it shows flashbacks, but it's not really, like, clear to me. I don't know. It was confusing for me, but I did like it. So I'd give it 2 thumbs up.
Yeah, I mean, the flashbacks and shit, I think, touch on basically just when he was a kid. And I think that's what the whole thing is, was showing the puzzle over and over again. Is kind of, like, alluding back to when he was a kid and putting that together. So they kind of tell you who the killer is right off the break. It's not really so much of a whodunit. It's a reveal of who he is now. You know what I mean? Like,
that's what I meant. Like, you had to like who the kid was now, what he would. Yeah, it's
a little bit different, but Pieces was a cool one for me, so you give this one 2 thumbs up. 2 thumbs up for me, so this is 4 thumbs up total. We both enjoyed this one. This is definitely one of my top favorite slasher films for sure now. It's definitely taken a high place up there. Very glad to dig into this one, and I was really happy to check this one out. So Pieces is definitely a dope one. That about wraps up all our reviews for this week's Body Count Reviews, but we are still not done the show. We still have another segment ahead, plus the final chapter, so don't go nowhere. We're going to take a brief little intermission. We're going to take a brief intermission and be back in just a moment, so don't go nowhere.
Wake up, kiddies. There's no time to sleep. It's time for the poll of the week.
That's right. It's your poll of the week. So we're going to start off with episode 4's poll, which was the Evil Dead franchise.
Yes, these are the big results.
Yeah, the results. So the question was, what is your favorite part of attending a horror convention? So number 1 with 4 votes was meeting the celebs. That's an appropriate answer, I guess.
That's the one that I actually chose. And that's why, one of the main reasons I end up going is to meet the celebs, you know what I mean? Like, that's the coolest thing, is to be able to talk to these people and, have a one-on-one moment with them. Just that moment in time is just cool to have, you know what I mean? And get to ask some of your favorite questions, you know what I mean? Things you want to know about your favorite movies, you know what I mean? That's just dope.
Yeah. Number 2 with 2 votes was screenings and premieres.
That's right. Now, screening and premieres, you know what I mean, makes sense because people want to see the most exclusive shit coming out. They want to see all the newest films. So I understand screenings and premieres, you know what I mean, getting those 2 votes for sure.
Yeah. And then I was the little loner who voted for vendors and merch. I don't know. I just like seeing other people's talents. Like, and then it's like, I need to step my game up. This is where I want to be one day. Like,
yeah, there's a lot of super duper talented people at these conventions, and it's awesome to see some of the work that they put together and the things that they create. It's absolutely mind-bending, some of the talents that these people have. So going to horror conventions and checking out the artwork and the vendors and all and the merch that's there is always dope for sure.
Yeah. And then with 0 votes was getting autographs, getting photos, and contests and events.
So no love for the photos, the autographs, and the events, but I gotta say, photos and autographs I kind of rate equally, and it's one of my favorite things about going to a con as well. I have a shitload of autographs and photos with different celebs, and that is one of my favorite things as well, but meeting them is the main thing, so that's why I picked that over the other 2, but that was the results that everybody voted. Next week, make sure that you guys vote. There is a poll every week. We have a poll this week, and I'm going to let you run over that. So go ahead and tell us about this week's poll of the week.
So, okay, a little bit extra, but whatever.
That's right.
Which immortal killer would win in a Royal Rumble? Candyman, Jason Voorhees, Pinhead, Victor Crowley, the Tall Man, or Freddy Krueger?
Damn. Now that is an epic slashing beatdown of some of the most brawny villains.
That's something I'd like to see, though.
Yeah, that would make for an ill fucking movie. But those are all immortal killers. So you have 6 brutal immortal killers in a brawl, battle royal style. Which one will be coming out victorious? I like that. I love things like that. So that's a very cool question. So that is our poll of the week. Make sure you participate with that on Facebook. You can follow us on Facebook at The Horror Headquarters. Make sure you go check the page out. Give us a like, or join the group rather. It's not a page, it's a group. So join, don't like, join the group, get into our discussions, get active and involved. We appreciate that shit. Make sure you vote into our poll for this week for the poll of the week.
If you have any answers that are not one of our options, I guess you could comment them too, so don't be afraid to do that.
Yeah, feel free to chime in if there's one that you didn't see that you would have liked to see, but make sure that you drop your vote for the ones that are asked. This way we can include you. We'd love to get interactive with our fans and listeners out there. We appreciate you guys checking out this show and listening in, so this is a great way for us to include you by having you in our poll of the week. So that's one of the reasons we try to do that. We will try to keep that going every week and hit you guys with a new one. So make sure that you get out there. Your vote counts and matters. We need to know what you guys are thinking. So keep answering these questions as we keep them coming your way.
Boom.
That about wraps up our poll of the week segment, which brings us to the end of the show, which is our final chapter.
Dun dun dun.
Dun, 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 dun. So this is the end of the show. We appreciate you guys tuning in. We've gone over everything now, our bone-breaking news, our vital organs discussion, talking about all 4 films from Critters in the franchise. We went over our Netflix best pick, which was Baskin from 2015. We talked about our Pick Your Poison, which was Terror Train from 1980, and Horror Express, which went into Versus from 1972. Body count reviews, we discussed Chopping Mall, Visiting Hours, Motel Hell, Body Bags, House on Willow Street, Zombievers, and Pieces. And we also went over the poll of the week and the results from last week from episode 4. So that brings us to the ending, the final chapter, and we are glad to wrap things up for the evening with you. We appreciate you guys tuning in and listening to everything we have to say and our thoughts.
I just want to say shout out to that one hater out there. We always have like one dislike on our videos, so whoever that is,
yeah, major shout outs to you, guy, girl, whoever.
And it's weird because they disliked the video 12 seconds after it went live. So
every time we release a video, it's the first few seconds. So it's obviously not the content they're disliking, it's just some haters. So salute to you. We appreciate you giving us a view, and we will gladly enjoy that view.
So yeah.
So we appreciate everybody tuning in and listening to us and checking out the show. We will be back next week with episode 6 with a brand new topic. We already know what it'll be. We're not going to reveal that yet. You will be able to find out early if you are following us in the Facebook group.
So do it.
That is another reason for you to join the group to see what we have going on and check out more info on the show. In closing words, I do want to give a shout out to the director behind the Theater Girl film and a shout out behind Serial Killer Magazine.
Yeah.
Both of these, this film and this publication, are both working with us now, and we're doing some cross promotion with them, and that is very cool, and I give respect to both of those guys. So salute to both of you, and I look forward to doing another episode next week. We will be back with more fresh content, so make sure you tune in, listen to what we have to say, and polluting your ears with all the most vile, horrific, hard trivia information, knowledge, and thoughts and thinking process learnings and whatnots and what have yous that you could possibly imagine.
Boom.
Make sure you tune in next week for another episode of Horror Headquarters, because we are just dying to talk horror.
Ooh.